Just wanted to keep everyone updated with what is happening down in Venezuela. The Eastern Attack Fleet has broken formation and has moved to nearly point-blank range off the northern coast of Suriname and Guyana, and you can see that right here. They were way out to sea, and with the announcement of Senator Bob Corker heading to Venezuela, I think the movement of this fleet should come as no surprise. Now, just to give everyone a shot of what it used to look like, we're going to go ahead and maximize this screen out here. This is my video from 2 days ago. You could see the fleet out here in a very tight formation, 1,000 miles or more off of Caracas, and now just in a matter of 2 days we have seen them move from these two tight groupings over here to what we showed just a little bit ago. Now they're here. Of course, this fleet has maintained position. I am sure that they are probably just a security force at this point, that they're going to use the classic pincers move. They're going to come in from the west in Colombia and then come in through Suriname and Guyana. And then, of course, this fleet will probably disperse here and create a security zone that will allow Puerto Rican / U.S. globalist forces to move directly into Caracas without any interference. Now, as I'd mentioned, Senator Bob Corker from Tennessee, I'm sure a lot of you remember him because he was the gentleman that secured the release of I keep screwing that up, LDS missionary, Josh Holt. He was being held down there for spying for the United States, and right around the time of the last election, Senator Bob Corker, who was not seeking re-election, went down there and negotiated his release. And of course, as you can see here on the right, after his harrowing ordeal of starvation, that he is just skin and bones and can barely stand on his own, unable to walk, because that's the story out of Venezuela. Everyone is starving. No one has any food. This is him just a couple of days later on an interview in Fox News. Here is, of course, Mr. Holt prior to his leaving for his CIA. I'm LDS missionary work. I got to get that right. Darn it. And of course, here's him secured in the facilities in Venezuela. So as you can see, we have before and after. Before and after. Such incredible starvation and hunger showing on the face of Mr. Holt here, like we have shown with multiple protesters against the Venezuelan government, especially Juan Requesens, who was had to suffer the indignation of going from 450 pounds down to about 225. I don't know how he lived through it. It's just terrible. Something clearly needs to be done, about the huge starvation issue with prisoners in Venezuela. Because you'd have to imagine, that political prisoners would be the last in line to get any kind of food whatsoever. And as we see here, the evidence shows. The evidence is clear that Mr. Holt was treated so poorly, and as you can see, he was barely able to conduct all of these interviews with Fox and all of the supporters of the current administration that secured his release from prison where he was treated so terribly. But just to say that we covered the bases, 6 October, top Republican senator will travel to Venezuela to make a final threat. To assess the situation down there. And given the fact that he's not seeking re-election from the state of Tennessee, I think that probably tells us everything we need to know. Well, it doesn't tell us everything we need to know, because Senator Bob Corker is a very interesting individual. He has quite a colorful history. He is part of a group they were called the Gang of 10, but now they're called the Gang of 20, that were attempting to free up the gridlock on energy reform in Congress. And one of the things that they were doing is offering all of these incentives. Let's see here. $7.5 billion in research and development to break technological barriers to alternative fuel. $7.5 billion to help American auto manufacturers become the world's leader in making alternative fuel vehicles. $7,500 tax credit for the purchase of primary non-petroleum fueled vehicles and a tax credit up to $2,500 for the retrofitting of existing vehicles. CO2 sequestration, nuclear energy, all sorts of different things that I don't know how big oil would have looked at this, because this was something that happened long before the repealing of the ban on exporting oil for profit. Changes the calculus completely. And I think that's why we are seeing Mr. Corker decide to step aside and not be a part of government anymore, so that he can work full-time for big oil, not big oil, I'm sorry, work full-time for the betterment of society as a whole. Now, it's strange that he comes from Tennessee, because of course that is basically home base for support for the current administration, but he is clearly not one who supports the current administration at all. And I'm sure that's why another reason I should say why he's leaving. So it's an interesting choice of someone to go to an oil nation and try to assess, for lack of a better word, the situation down there. Meanwhile, we see two distinct armadas of ships, one on the north side and one on the east side, one closing now to nearly point-blank range. I'm sure that's going to play at least a small role in the discussions between Mr. Corker and Mr. Maduro. How this is going to play out is anybody's guess at this point. I really don't know how anyone can make the allegation that Mr. Maduro has been in this for the money the entire time, because he has had ample opportunities over the last 2 years that if he really wasn't genuine about his belief in his countrymen and getting Venezuela off of quote-unquote big oil, I don't know why he would have lasted this long, or why he would have even bothered. See, what a lot of people don't realize is prior to the election, this last August, the election was supposed to be in May, and he put it off at the request of the opposition. And he went to, I believe it was the Dominican, and he sat down and had negotiations for months with these people. He didn't have to. He was the president of the country. And he talked with them, and he tried to come to some kind of an agreement with them, some type of middle ground, and they weren't having it. They wanted complete and total dictatorial control of the country, and for he and his entire cabinet to leave, no questions asked. That was their only position. And when he wouldn't acquiesce to that, that's why we see the situation we do today. It's amazing he survived. I can't imagine, what that would have been like down there. The CIA doesn't, I'm sorry, not the CIA. The Mormons, the LDS missionaries had just nothing but good intentions, sending their folks down to Venezuela and just trying to bring them into the light of the truth. And, you can see the starvation on his face. You can see the torture that he must have endured during this time down there. And here, getting ready to board the plane, or I'm not sure if this was whether he's boarding here or whether he was leaving. Actually, it looks like this might be boarding. That clearly he was heavily mistreated, just like he alleged in his video that he needed this medical treatment, or he was going to die and they were going to kill him, and all of this other nonsense. It's funny because they accuse the Venezuelans of doing all these horrible, terrible things. The guy was held down there for months and months and months, and he walks out looking like this? Really? If they'd wanted him dead, he'd be dead. So, I guess we'll just leave that there, but top Republican senator is set to issue ultimatums. We'll see how that plays out. Like, share, subscribe.